Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. In War of the Visions, I recently made a video talking about the story and setting in War of the Visions, but in this video let's talk about the actual events in the game. I recently went back and rewatched all of the story in Global, and my understanding and enjoyment of the story was much improved watching it all together, rather than watching it in pieces and interrupted by battles and with like 2 weeks, 3 weeks of real lifetime in between chapters. And I think that's the best way to watch. Maybe even in real time you could just skip the story, and then later on a weekend or sometime when you have some free time, you can watch a bunch of the story at once. And it's definitely easier to follow and it moves at a quicker pace. But in this video I'll point out some important plot points, draw attention to little hints that might get lost otherwise, and then talk about things that I personally like. And I said this in the Rant on Story and Setting video, but I'm personally interested in mythology and history, so any hints of that in the game I'll point out as well. And I know that a lot of people get upset about the decisions that characters make, calling them dumb or stubborn, but I'm always like, if a character is dumb or stubborn, it's because that's how the character is, and that's how the writer wrote it. If you would do something different in that situation, I believe you. But when I watch or read fiction, I'm pretty passive and I just accept the author's vision for the character. But anyway, let's start by watching the CG intro movie, and then we'll watch it at half speed. The producer said that there are hints in this movie, but I've watched it many times at slow speed and I haven't seen anything. Maybe you can catch something and let me know. To me, the most interesting thing about this video is the giant crystal floating above Leonis castle, and it looks like rock is falling off of it. Where did that crystal come from? And why is there rock falling off of it? My guess is that the crystal was buried somewhere around Leonis castle and was just revealed, so there's still some rock stuck to it as it's flying into the sky. And then there's the animated intro video that happens when you boot up the game. I won't show the video, but I'll show a couple stills that interested me. But here's a shot of the Snow White guard in the Crystal Church. It's very cool. But there's also this figure in the center. My first thought was that this was like a headless statue, but it could also be a mannequin wearing armor. And it looks a little bit like Stern's golden armor in shape, but not really in detail or in color. But it probably is his armor, since he appears in that same scene and then puts on the visor. It's very weird that the way that it happens in the scene doesn't match what actually happens in the story, but oh well. And next, here we see Lucia and King Jaden of Randall. And in a way, Randall is spoken about as the biggest threat, although Muraga and Sadari are also spoken of as threats. I like different houses scheming against each other, just like Game of Thrones or the Ogre series games. But I also like the ultimate threats, like you see in Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. I said this in my story rant, but there's no ultimate threat in the story for War of the Visions so far. So it kind of makes it feel like less focused. I'm sure there will be an ultimate threat introduced later, hopefully not too much later. Alright, and then here we see some giant rocks crashing into a bridge. Is this ice magic, or is it pieces of the crystal falling into the bridge? We don't see anyone cast magic, ice magic, in that intro video, so my gut is telling me that it's pieces of the crystal, but I want to ask, why is it in pieces? And then are they destroying crystals like in previous Final Fantasies? And then this scene, this is like a replay from the CG intro, but here is Mont and Stern facing off in front of Leonis castle, again with the crystal hanging in the air. And this must be the main conflict going forward, right? That's the way this is being sold. Alright, next, I wanted to go into the recap videos, which we can watch if we look at the first part of every chapter. And I feel like they do a good job, such a good job, that I don't feel like I have to explain any of the broader strokes of the story to help people with comprehension. If you just watch these, especially one after the other, you get a good sense of the story. And then I like the sort of like the non-animation style. It feels like a puppet show or a tapestry or a Méliès film, something like low-tech and like maybe medieval.
国境付近で賊に襲われている旅団あり、リオニス王国の王エルデと第一王子モントは第二部隊早急を率いて旅団救出へと向かう。だが賊の襲撃を受けていたのは大国ホルンの姫君マシュリーであった。モントはマシュリーらと力を合わせ賊を退ける者の衝撃の事実を知らされる。マシュリーはリオニスの敵国であるフェネスの王ムラガへと嫁ぐ三神の儀の途中だったのだ。そのムラガがマシュリーの奪還を大義名分とし、リオニスへの侵攻を開始。そしてフェネスと同盟を結ぶホルンの軍勢がムラガらと合流する。混沌とする戦場でモントはマシュリーに絶対に守ると約束するのだが、ホルンとフェネスの連合軍の勢いにリオニス軍は撤退を余儀なくされていた。エルデは籠城を選択せず、モントを引き連れてリオニス城を放棄。援軍を請うため北の同盟国ウェズエットを目指す。一方、第二王子シュテルはヘレナ妃と共にフェネスの人質となる道を選ぶ。リオニスの血は絶やさぬ。たとえ神を敵に回そうとも。かくして二つに引き裂かれたリオニス家。北ソエムのはクリスタル教の教祖サーダリー。ホルンとフェネスを結びつけた張本人であった。マシュリーの力及ばず、シュテルとヘレナ妃はムラガの手中に落ちる。さらにサーダリーは狡猾であった。シュテルの抱く憎悪を巧みに利用し、実の父であるエルデを討たせようと画策したのだ。そのシュテルと引き離されたヘレナ、そして第一部隊郵送は 打ち捨てられたアンビル城へ向かう。かの古城に眠る遺物を手にするためである。一方のモントたちは村娘ミンウの導きにより極寒の王国ウェズエットを目指す。ウェズエットと合流すれば以前のリオニスを取り戻せると信じた。しかしラマダは星の不吉なささやきを聞く。月と星はよこしまな意志により分かたれ、大地より滅びの輝きを呼び覚ますでしょう。
Okay, and then from here, let's look at individual scenes. And then here, this is one of the very first scenes in the game, but we have Edide saying his line that he says all the time, the Leonis line shall live on, even should we fall afoul of gods to defend it. So there's some foreshadowing here. Is the Leonis family going to fall afoul of gods? But another thing that's interesting about this is that he mentions gods. And so there is indeed mythology in this continent of Ardra. So that's good. That's what I wanted. It would be just weird if there wasn't any. But no details given, like how many gods, like how religious are these people. And then also these gods, we see the gods, the text here, it is not capitalized. And then like the way that different cultures think about gods is different, and then maybe could, merit a capital G or a lowercase g. In Christianity, there's just the one God, so he gets a capital G. But in Japan, there's gods all over the place. There's river gods, there's mountain gods, and like one god like per mountain and per river. And I don't know if they even like created the mountain or the river or whatever, they just live there. So that would be more like a lowercase g kind of god. And then the thing is that when you look at Japanese, sometimes it's difficult to tell like what the subject of the sentence is. And so you could translate it as either like this lowercase gods here, or you could translate it as the gods and you capitalize both of them. And that would be very kind of like a different nuance. Lowercase gods, again, that could be like the Japanese way of thinking about gods. The gods, that could be like Zeus and like all of the other gods that came out of his head. Or that could be like Odin and everybody else hanging out in Asgard. Those would be the gods. But hopefully in the future we will get a better look at what these gods are, and then maybe if they deserve a uppercase G or a lowercase g. Okay, here is a scene where we kind of get a first look at the ancient artifact, which is imbued with a power. This is the ring that Edide gives to Mont so that he can summon visions. And this is another one of the things that I'm very interested to see where this goes. Like how many of these artifacts are there, who made them, like what purpose are they supposed to serve? But we'll talk about this more once we get to Stern and his armor. Okay, here we have Shuzelt and Mashiri talking. And then here they're kind of foreshadowing the big threat to the west, the Randall Kingdom. I will say that the character of Shuzelt doesn't really interest me at all. And I don't care about his relationship with Naya. And then actually all of the, I don't know if you could even call them romance, but all of the romance stories in this game so far, they're not really affecting me. Except for Dario and Vineta, that's a great story. The thing about storytelling in Ogre and Ivalice games versus storytelling in Final Fantasy is that the former are much more serious, with less space for humor or romance, while in the latter there is room for that stuff. And then War of the Visions seems to want to do both. I'm totally for that if they can pull it off, but so far the lighter moments of War of the Visions, they kind of fall flat for me. Also the attempts at humor, like Liat and then the big guy, Balo, their exchanges don't really do anything for me. There is humor in Final Fantasy Tactics from now and then, and it works because the overall mood in there is not super serious. But like in Tactics Ogre, which is a much more serious game, there's no humor in there, it wouldn't fit. Okay, next here are Muraga and Rob. This part of the conversation is not very important to the story, but Muraga does reference the Goddess of Victory, which means there is a Goddess of Victory. And then this one has a capital G, so maybe there is like a team, I don't know, a cavalcade of gods, and then they each have their jobs or whatever. So that's a hint at the mythology of this continent. Also, the translation of Muraga into the English is awful. I talked about this in the translation rant video, but yeah, Alright, and then here's another scene which doesn't really do anything for the story, but it's between Shadowlynx and Mont. She's all about the job, and then she doesn't think about herself very much. But here, Mont shows that he would mourn for her death, and she seems genuinely surprised by this, which goes to show that she does have feelings, maybe some kind of self-pity. But yeah, that was a nice moment, kind of a humanizing moment for both of them. And I do like Mont. He's a goody two-shoes, but I generally like goody two-shoes characters anyway, so yeah, he's working for me. Next we have Eride talking to Mashiri, and here he's kind of hinting at his, maybe his true purpose or his like secret role. So he's calling himself a guardian, but it's still not made clear what he is a guardian of. And it seems like he's even keeping this a secret from his family, which I don't know if is totally smart or not. Yeah, and here, like a scene a little bit later, we see kind of a fallout of Eride sticking to this secret mission, but keeping it from his family. His son Stern gets very angry at him, because he is making these decisions, but Stern doesn't understand why. And so he falls back on like putting family first, while Eride has some kind of greater purpose that he's not telling anybody. And then for me, this is good enough of a motivation for Stern to like go against his father. It's not uncommon at all for a son to hate his dad and love his mom, like is what is going on here. Tale as old as time. Okay, and then here we get a little bit more insight into the threat from the west, Randall. And then here I'm going to play a scene, not a screenshot, but an actual scene. But this is a further conversation between the same four characters. But basically, this is kind of like this conflict in a nutshell. If you have a grasp of this dynamic, then you kind of understand like most of the story.
ホルンとフェネスを結びつけたのはサーダリーだって聞いたけど。
ええ、そうです。奴が西のランダルの脅威を煽り、ロブ様が決意なさいました。
サーダリーって人はホルンの王を動かすほどの実力者なのか。
シュゼルト殿、実際はどうなのだ。我らはサーダリー殿とは一切接点がないものでな。
クリスタル教の宗師で、ホルン領の北西、国境付近に教会の総本山である大聖堂があります。
クリスタル教のことは聞いたことがあるけど、一体何をしてるんだい。まさかクリスタルを集めたりしてるのかな。
その通りです。
そうなのか。
クリスタルは様々な力の源。それを集めて民衆のために役立てようというのが。
表向きはそうだね。
表向き？じゃあ本当は違うの？
戦に使うことを画策しているなんて言われることもあるね。
それに危機感を抱いているのでしょう。西の大国ランダルはサーダリーと激しく対立しています。
ランダルの王ジェーダンは東へと領土を拡大することに躍起になっておるらしいな。自らと教会を守るために半ば強引にホルンとフェネスを結びつけたのだろうな。
はい、私もそう思っています。
Okay, then here again, these four characters. they go a little bit into the history of the Wezet kingdom. And then of all of the different kingdoms, I feel like the Wezet story is the most interesting. It's got the most like history, the most political intrigue. Reminds me of Game of Thrones or like the Ivalice games or Ogre games. I'll talk about the Wezet situation more in a future video. Okay, and then here we see Stern. He leaves the castle, and then he confronts Muraga and Sadari, and then he explains why he quit the Leonis family, why he doesn't like his father. And I've said this before, but I really like the character of Stern. He's not your typical angry guy, even though he does angry very, very well. But he's smart, and he doesn't take any guff from anybody. He's independent, and then he has a good tactical mind, too, it seems. Stern is no pushover. I really, really like him. And then here, this next scene, this is right after Stern tells off Muraga. Stern is kind of immune to Muraga's rage because Sadari orders him to help Stern. So yeah, just more proof that Stern can definitely hold his own. And then here, this is the scene where Stern receives the armor, and then you have this messenger kind of explaining how the armor works. But yeah, turning hatred into additional power, that is not a benevolent ancient relic. So if all of the relics kind of follow this pattern, then maybe these relics are put onto the continent in order to, you know, stir up more war. Or maybe there's like two types of relics, like good relics and bad relics. I don't know yet, we'll have to see. Okay, and here we have some new characters, Andorad and Salia. They're cool, they're part of Horn, I like them. And then here we have Dorando and Gagaras. They are part of the Crystal Church. They're really cool, and they have really good Japanese voice actors. I like them a lot. I still want them to release Gagaras. Hopefully he's a wind element black mage. I definitely use him in JP. Okay, and then to end, once Helena and then that first force of Leonis get separated from Stern, then Helena has the idea to go to Anvil Castle in order to get some ancient relics. And then here, there's a little bit of history here, a talk of a previous king. I wish they would elaborate on that more. Who was the previous king? Was it Edude's father? If it wasn't, then why, you know? Alright, so that will sum up my story recap for the first 3 chapters. And then I'll do this every 3 or 4 chapters based on how long they are. Alright, if you're enjoying the story, let me know what you like about it. I'd be interested to hear. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.